All right, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. Playing around with renaming things a little bit, but being that we are in a new year, it's a good time for an origin story. I'm making a pretty big push across multiple platforms to really hone in on what Strong Roots Resources is, what I'm about, and all of that. And although on multiple podcast appearances, I have told something of an abbreviated version of the origin story. So tonight I figured why not the whole story? So before I jump into that, quick farm news. If you didn't already see it in the Telegram group or on TikTok and Facebook and wherever else I decided to post about it because I was so excited. We got lambs, we've got snow, and we've got lambs. So we had number 19, which is one of the older ewes. She gave birth to twins, both females. So we are super happy about that. They are up. They are doing their thing, nursing, stretching, wagging their little tails, all the signs of a healthy and robust lamb. So as I knew they would, as soon as this winter weather rolled in, we got lambs popping out. So expecting more anytime. I am relatively sure that certainly all of the adult ewes are bred, and quite a few of the yearlings look to be as well. So we'll see. We'll see what shows up, but we could we could have a lot of sheep before too long. So let's see. We were at 19. We're now at 21. So who knows? Just checked on them. Everybody looks great. Super happy about it. All the rest of the critters are doing fine. I got the rabbits up out of the tractor rabbits, got them out of their tractors with, since we've got several inches of snow here, and got them up in their kennels in the dry in the woodshed. The chickens basically are like, screw this. We're just going to stay in our coop. So everybody's doing well out here. We had plenty of warning that this storm was coming in. They're calling it a storm. It's snow, and it's a little bit more snow than we normally get. But when I think storm, I think of like high winds and drifts and all kinds of stuff going wrong. And this has really just been a gentle snow shower all day long. So we've known this was coming for about 2 weeks. So I have plenty of time to get extra firewood, undercover, and just kind of do double checks on things. So no big deal. We're just going to hang out on the farm and take care of business until we melt off and dry out in a couple of days. So I've been away for a couple of weeks, been away from the live streams because I had 2 Fridays in a row of events that I needed to be at and some long work days. And I've had a pretty decent stream of work continuing into the winter. So that's been nice. But I'm ready to kind of kick off the new year, tell you guys some stories, and kind of see what the year is going to bring. I am largely optimistic and excited about this year. I've got a lot of stuff cooking up in terms of classes I'm planning to teach, events I'm planning to be at, and honing in on more stuff here on the farm. So feeling good about it all the way around. I've got my little oil-filled space heater here in front of me. It's actually not super cold. I can run this off of our little generator, which is not a big deal to run it for, an hour and a half here and there when I need to be in the workshop. But it's actually not real cold. We're hovering like right around 30, 31. So this is not like this time last year when it was, 0 degrees and 8 inches of snow. So, and I have my poop in a better group this year. I'm not playing with an outdoor water heater and all that kind of business. So here's to having it a little more pulled together this year. Hey, we got some folks popping up in the chat here. Let me take a minute to say hi to everybody. Happy Friday to Pippin and everybody else. Pippin, Tyler, and I are fixing to put shocks on the Jeep probably sometime in the coming week. with an air kit. So we're the poor thing rides like shit. So I helped Tyler on a couple of his jobs recently, and I said, "Hey, I don't want any money if you will help me get these shocks on," because I've watched some videos and it looks like there's going to be torches and drilling out of bolts happening in order to get this done. But the poor thing has been overdue for a long time. And Homestead Consultant is here. Good to see you, Ryan. Thanks for dropping in. Diesel heater. We actually have one up at Dad's barn. And I also have one that it's not a diesel heater, but it runs off of a propane tank. It's I can't really think of what exactly it's called, but my father-in-law gave it to me, and you can just hook it up to a grill tank. And it is relatively, I wouldn't use it like in my shop, but I'm comfortable using it like in the high tunnel with clearances and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like the Big Buddy. This thing's old. Like it is. I'll have to. It's actually up in Dad's barn right now because he had borrowed it. I'm not even sure what brand it is. It's ancient. It was something that Chris pulled out of his barn, cleaning stuff out, and asked if we could use it. And it's one of those things where with enough clearances, like I'm okay, using it in like I said, a shop or open area in the barn or something. Yeah, Tyler's got one of those diesel things that look like a rocket engine. So we'll set that up if we need to work. Like we'll set it outside the barn but pointing in on the rolling door side if we need to work on something in there on the slab. So it's doable. We got a few workarounds here. But fortunately, I seem to be a lot more. I'm pretty cold adapted at this point. As long as I am, decent on gear and I just kind of layer up and stuff, I do okay. I mean, I've mostly been outside today, just kind of watching the animals and just kind of tooling around, looking at tracks and stuff. But it is nice, like if we're working on something where, gloves just aren't going to let the work happen. Those diesel heaters are nice. And since I can refill, like for the Mr. Buddy types, I've got the adapter to refill the little green canisters off of a bigger tank. So one of those is handy to have around too for just very tight space heating. I'm kind of I like this little oil heater because it's very, very, very safe. And it's on its low setting, it only pulls 600 watts, which my little Generac just like shrugs off. So yeah, if you would like to send me a link, by all means, drop it in the chat or wherever, because I like options. I mean, that's the thing. I like options, and those kind of things I can easily, let's say, justify purchasing when I need to be working in the shop. I've actually got a big stack of hand tools from one of my customers that she's asked me to take care of. Basically just clean, get the rust off, sand, clean the handles, oil them up, that kind of thing, sharpen. And I may do that. I'm actually thinking about doing that tomorrow in the wood shed, which still has some open space in it because I haven't stacked it full of wood yet. And that big propane heater might be the way to go, so I can do that and just kind of keep my hands warm while I'm working. I don't have quite enough room in the workshop proper to really be swinging shovels around and that sort of thing. Digger's here. Digger, good to have you. So thank you guys for hanging out. So let me double check my notes here, but here goes the story. Almost the Carrie Brown origin story. We're actually going to go that far back. So as I've mentioned before, where we live now is where I grew up. Although we were away for about 16 years while I was, we had an apartment for a little bit, and we had our urban homestead in the city for 14 years. But I am back where I spent the first 18-ish years of my life. So in a lot of ways we are still kind of reconnecting. have you ever gone somewhere where it's like you remember how it used to be? Like you're in the same spot, but your brain keeps telling you, no, it's this way, but it's changed. There's a lot of that around here. A lot has changed since what I remember growing up. And I'm kind of still discovering that when I explore different areas of the land. And so it's a little bit disconcerting sometimes. So, so I spend a lot of time kind of my brain switching back and forth between what I remember from, the 90s and the early 2000s to what's going on out here now and what that means about how I design and develop this land. But so going back to my childhood, there were some beef cattle on this land, and Mom had some gardens, but other than that, not a whole lot. Like not a whole lot of like actual animal infrastructure going on. And once the cows were gone in the mid 90s, when Dad didn't have time to manage the cattle anymore because he was both starting a business out of his barn, starting the motorcycle business, and also working at dealerships at various times. He couldn't do all of it. So the cows went away. And beyond, other than some bush hogging in certain areas that were steeper were no longer managed in any form. It just, everything just reverted back to succession. And that's a big part of what I'm working within my design now is what happened with succession. So I grew up mostly with, some forest edge, lots of cedars, some locust trees, and mostly pasture. And if I remember correctly, quite a mix of grasses and, forbs and herbs and things of that nature. Not a whole lot in the way of things that we would call invasive or non-native. There's a lot of that stuff now because of the management not happening for 30 years. So that's what I recall. Like when I left to go to college, do the EMS thing, get a house in the city and do all that. That's what I remember. And that's not what was the case when I returned. So the, let's start the origin story with working on the ambulance. Prior to that, I did a year at East Tennessee State University as a communications major, which is kind of funny because now I've come back around to a job that is largely heavy in communication. So funny how that works out. But I thought I was going to be a writer, a reporter, or something of the sort. And I went to college for a year to discover that I hated college and everything about it. I mean, it wasn't all a bad experience or anything, but I simply did not have the patience to pursue a bachelor's degree. Also, this was very transformative. 9/11 happened when I was a freshman in college. And I had that moment of, oh, I don't want to write about what's going on. I want to be in the middle of what's going on for what it's worth. And that was young. Let's see, I would have been 19 in September. So I finished that year, came back home, and tried to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. Initially, I thought about joining the Coast Guard. And I don't know why, because I don't like the water and I get seasick easily. But I was still kind of in this mode where I kind of wanted to honor my ancestors. So my grandfather was in the Coast Guard and the Navy. And I just kind of thought, well, I'll do what he did for some reason. And I started all the paperwork for that, went to the recruiter's office and was studying for the ASVAB. And like a week or two prior to going to test for the ASVAB, I went to the doctor for just like a regular checkup, and he discovered that my thyroid was like way enlarged, way overactive. I didn't realize this was going on. Like he could actually palpate it and feel it. And I just thought that I was kind of a normal, older teenager at this stage. I was, 19, 20. Because I could swing between being like absolutely exhausted and wanting to sleep all the time to like incredibly anxious and hyperactive. And I just thought, oh, just teenage hormones. Everybody blames everything on your hormones changing. So, but he discovered that, and I found myself having to undergo this radioactive iodide treatment to basically kill my thyroid and make it calm the hell down, and ultimately wind up on a replacement hormone. It took months, and I had to go in for repeat blood testing to see if that thyroid was shutting down or not, essentially. Talk about things I would have handled differently, knowing what I know now. I certainly would not have jumped on that as quick as I did, because they made it seem like I had to do it right frickin' then. And they knew it wasn't cancer. They tested for that. But when all that happened, I went back to the recruiter office and I was like, well, what do I do about this? And he was like, well, you got to get this resolved, and it may take you out of qualifying for this anyhow. Because at the time, I don't know about now, but at the time, they really didn't want anybody on any kind of permanent medication, which, Synthroid, once you're on it, you're pretty much stuck on it for the most part, especially if your thyroid is dead, like mine eventually and now is. So I was like, well, crap, what's next? And I remember this time. So this time I was out of college, and I was back, and I was living at home with mom and dad, which after being away at college for a year is hard to do. It was hard to do. So around that time, did a little bit of traveling. That's around the time I bought my Forerunner. Traveled around the Southeast a little bit, even went to Canada for a little while, kind of did a brief period of meandering, trying to figure out what I want to do with myself. And I thought, well, let me just go into public service on the civilian side. And I enrolled in community college to get my EMT license. And that's what I did. And so 3 semesters of that, followed by going into EMS. Now, when I tell the story, I always talk about, my 15 years in EMS. And yes, I did do 15 years consecutively, but I also had a lot of other stuff going on during that time. And this is kind of where we start steering towards realizing how ill-equipped I am to be an employee and how wired I am to be an entrepreneur and to run my own business. It just took me all of my 20s and a good portion of my 30s to figure that out. So the EMS, that began in August of 2004. And that was I had the most bizarre relationship with this job. There were times that I really loved it. There were times that it was very rewarding. And there were times where it was, pretty much the most horrible thing that had ever happened to me. And so at the time I had my EMT basic license, which at the time, the way the protocols were set, EMTs didn't actually get to do a whole lot with patient care. We drove a lot. We assisted our paramedic partners, or if you were paired with an EMT, a fellow EMT, you were basically just running like inter-facility transfers. Over time, as the protocols improved and changed and all kinds of structures changed, and I went on to get my EMT advanced, I got to the point where I could, provide more patient care and actually feel like I was making a difference with people and not just, driving a big boxy taxi. But it really didn't matter all that much. It didn't matter that I was still getting burned out. And so 5 years in, I went part-time to stay with my grandmother and be a caretaker for her. She had a stroke. So Nan was basically a third parent to me. We were incredibly close. And, she lived next door. I saw her every day after school. She, like I said, she was as important, as influential in my life as my own parents. So she had an incredibly debilitating stroke. And after she was in the nursing home for a few weeks, it became very obvious to me that if we were going to give her any kind of chance at a decent, kind of last few years of her life, it couldn't be in a nursing home. We needed to get her back home. And she really didn't have any like medical interventions going on that I couldn't handle and that I couldn't train, my other family members to handle. So I did that. So I went part-time to the point where for the first year or so, I would only work a shift, once or twice a month, which was like the bare minimum you could do and still be considered a per diem employee over there. So I got a break from that. But then, being a full-time caretaker, full-time, I did like 5 days a week, like kind of 9 to 5. And then we had other family members, other paid caregivers coming in to cover the rest of the time because it was 24-hour care. She could not be left alone. She could not transfer herself. She could not walk. She really even couldn't speak and express her needs at that point. So I did that for a year or two. And then we took care of her in the home for a total of 4 years. And by the third year and the fourth year, I started tapering back how much I was there. We had other paid caregivers, we found good friends of the family who could be caretakers for her. And I started working again a little bit more on the ambulance. And frankly, it was mostly because of money. I mean, that was the thing. At that point, we were making $12, $13 an hour on the ambulance. And while I received a stipend to help take care of Nan, it wasn't that. And there was certainly no quote unquote overtime, the way everybody makes their money in EMS by working overtime. So I was kind of back in it again. I was back in it. I was for most of that time still part-time in the sense that I didn't have an assigned shift. I just picked up shifts, and at least when I left, about half the number of employees were part-time employees because they would just make their own schedules. When staffing is terrible, and if you've been around long enough, you can pretty much tell them when you're going to work and they'll take it to an extent because something's better than nothing. Nan passed away in 2013. And at that time, I had been back, full-time for a while. She spent the last, if I remember correctly, last 5 or 6 months back in a care facility. We actually got her into the Tennessee Veterans Care Facility because her husband had been a veteran. And we were, for the most part, happy with the care she received there because at this point, everybody was pretty tired and pretty worn out. And taking care of Nan she wasn't a difficult person to deal with at all. She was in most ways easygoing, but as she, as the effects of the stroke really took hold, she got weaker. It was more work to transfer her. It was, it's just hard. It's one of the hardest things that anybody can do is to be a caregiver. And it's one of the most overlooked jobs that most people, that almost all of us engage with at some point in our lives with whether it's parents, grandparents, a spouse, children who have things go wrong. So I land, back full time working, and again, like burned out again. So at this point, I'm kind of at like the 10-year mark, and I am just so over it. I don't really know how to describe it except that you work in a system where it's just incredible call volume, no rest. On your days off, you got supervisors blowing up your phone trying to get you to come in and work, and it just felt like it was constant. And I'm not the kind of person, I do not have like an endless capacity for that kind of thing. So I was hanging out with some friends one night at the campfire, and they were telling me how they had a position open for a dishwasher at their bakery, little family bakery in a neighborhood not far from the farm. And I was like, and pardon my French here in a minute, but I was like, I'll come wash your fucking dishes, because I didn't care what they were paying, and it turns out like it was comparable to what I was making on the truck. And I was like, I'll go wash your dishes. Like I just needed something else to do that did not require the level of stress and all that. So I did. So picked up that job and retained part-time status still. And I was kind of back to like, I would show up, like I'd work like an 8-hour shift every other week or so. Like I would work at the bakery and then, wrap up my day there at like 4 or 5 o'clock, get on the truck at 6 and work like a weird swing shift and come home in the real early morning. And that was pretty doable for a while. That was doable this whole time. So pretty much from, oh gosh, I got to think here. 07. Yeah, we got the house in 07. From 07 on, I'm doing my urban homesteading thing. This is going on in the background the whole time, even while I'm taking care of Nan, even while I'm working part-time and doing all this stuff. I'm building the gardens. I'm learning all these systems. I'm taking all these classes online. Like I'm just totally, this is, that was my therapy. That was my escape, was building out these systems and figuring out how integrated I could get them, understanding all these ways everything works together, and doing it on a micro scale, and then kind of getting to the point where a lot of my friends are, they're getting houses. Everybody's in that age where they're kind of starting to get houses and yards, and they're hollering at me. They're like, hey, how do I do this? They were kind of into it. They thought it was cool. So I had started kind of quote unquote consulting for free, probably by 2012 or so. That is happening. And when I'm at Nan's or when I'm on the truck, because we're kind of sort of not really, I definitely don't even have a smartphone at this time. Like I'm still working off of probably a Razor or something like that. And so I've got my books and my magazines, Mother Earth News and all that stuff that I'm bringing on the truck, and everything between calls is, reading and planning and taking notes and thinking about stuff. And I'm very immersed in like the DIY culture at this time. Like I found Knoxville's little single speed bike riding, punk rock, guerrilla gardening, seed bombing crew. And that was my first experience with, I guess you can call it counterculture or whatever, but people who were just not going along with the basic suburbia consumerist mindset. Those were my people. And while I'm only in contact with one or two of those people, most of them have moved away. That was a big time transformative era for me, because I just felt like I was like, oh, I can figure any of this stuff out. I mean, we're even pretty much like, I guess YouTube was kind of a thing, but I didn't know it was a thing. So we were working off of zines and flyers and stickering and all this stuff. It was really cool, and it only lasted a few years, but it certainly steered my life in a different direction looking back on it. So dumpster diving, all that stuff, frugal living, and it was because it was a necessity. It was a necessity because I was, our income was, we were able to pull it off because we were frugal, because Angel was working at this time too, although neither of us were making shit. I mean, maybe $10, $11 an hour for most of that. We had gotten a mortgage that we lived under our means barely. we had a strict budget, and we made it work, because I was trying to work in such a way, like, it was really important to me that I was able to be off duty. Like, some people just worked constantly, and I couldn't do that. So I was like, I worked my assigned shifts, whether I was full time or part time. I did not try to go for all this overtime for this particular era. And I said, let's just be as wise as we can. But it was always one of those things, like, we get just enough money into savings, and like an appliance would shit the bed, or an unexpected medical bill, dentist bill, something like that would happen. It was just one of those things where I was like, just the instant it seemed like we got a little bit of something stowed away, gobbled up. We were fortunate in the fact that, like, we never had to carry a credit card balance. Like, we were always able to pay stuff off. I mean, there were times that we would use a credit card, but we were always able to pay, because I have like this complete and deep-seated fear, not just of debt, but like credit card debt or some kind of debt that, you can't discharge. So that was kind of that era. Did the bakery thing for a while, I think it was for 2 years. It was a year or 2 years. I'm going to go with 2 years. My brain is, it's a bit jumbled up. But after a time, it was the same thing. I was like, man, I'm just, not making any money. It wasn't a bad job. In fact, it was an incredibly low stress job, because I was so accustomed, like, my stress level was so bonkers adapted that, nothing about working dishes and like maintenance at the bakery was like any big deal at all. It was like, it was just easy peasy. And this was the same time. So at this point, I've got my first smartphone, and I have discovered podcasts. I have discovered the survival podcast, the prepper stuff, and I was just like all in. And that's around the time that I actually discovered probably the word permaculture. I had been doing it, I think, without knowing the word. So I'm doing the kind of work that doesn't require a lot of concentration. So I am just like inputting information all day long at this job. And at that time, I start thinking, like, there's got to be a way to take this and make something out of it beyond just, my own little space. So while I don't launch it right then, it's in the background. It's in the background and kind of just brewing. But after a couple of years, I was to the point, I was like, we need a cushion. We need a monetary cushion so I can do what it is that I really want to do, even though I didn't really know what that was yet. So, and we were very close to, I really wanted Angel to be able to quit her job. And in order to do that, I needed to be making more money. That was just it. There was no, there was just nothing, that was just the way the numbers worked. So I resigned my position at the bakery and went back to the truck again, still part-time, but picking up more shifts, getting overtime basically. And pretty much have been picking up with this one guy, Andrew, and he had been in the field for just a little bit longer than I had, and we got along great. We had a good partnership. He was easy to work with. I mean, it was just that, and that would make or break that job. Who you worked with, it doesn't matter what the hell else is going on. That could make it tolerable. So we were sitting at Post one day, and we're looking at all these open shifts, and there's this 24-hour open shift that ran, I think, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. or it was 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. 24-hour shifts, 24 hours on, 48 hours off. And Andrew is part-time too. And he was like, hey, you want to do it? He was like, you'll make $50,000 a year if you do this. And I thought about it, and I went home. I talked to Angel about it. I said, okay, we'll do it. We'll do it. So he and I grabbed that truck, Um, and I started making money. I did that for after about 6 months. We had enough money stowed away where I told Angel, I said, look, I'm good with it. Quit this job. She was working for a hospital in the kind of position where you may be familiar with shit rolls downhill. She was at the bottom of the hill. And it was one of those things where she was like, it's not a bad job. Like it was office work. It was administrative work. She had an office. She didn't have patient contact, but it was just one of those things where, there were enough other people who didn't want to do their job that made it difficult for her and her work partner to do their job. And I was like, look, at this point, where we're at financially, because we were real close to, we were actually at this point paying towards the principal of the house. We were only a few years away from having the house paid off because we had done a 15-year mortgage. So there was that. We had early on refinanced from a 30 down to a 15 after the market dropped out, the bottom dropped out, and that was a big help. So I said, just quit. We'll figure it out. And, at that point too, like she was having, some mobility problems and issues with the arthritis where I'm like, it makes more sense for you to stay home and enjoy your life and not be spending 8 to 10 hours a day at that place. So she did. And that's been the case ever since. So that was very important to me that we could get her out of that job. Andrew and I worked together full time for a couple of years. And, after a couple of years, I had enough money stowed, and I had burnt out to the level. I said I burned out 3 times, and the third time I did it in 5-year increments. And the third time I was like, I'm actually done. And I had gone part-time one more time because I was kind of paranoid about totally just, kicking that door shut for good. Because that's pretty much what I had known, my entire adult life at that point. And I had in earnest begun exploring other options. I was like, I want to build more skill set. I want to do something, but I wasn't quite ready to kind of launch any kind of business. So I decided I would join the Carpenters Union. I'm not real sure what I was thinking when I decided to do that. Because again, kind of like when I was thinking I would go into the Coast Guard, I don't really like building stuff much. I can, and I kind of, at this point, have a decent idea of what I'm doing. I can frame and I can square and I can read a tape and I can do that kind of stuff. And I can figure stuff out and I can read plans. But I just thought, what the heck? It's a union job. Supposed to be good benefits, all this kind of stuff. Did the classes, did the OSHA, did the scaffolding stuff and all that through the union. But I was looking around and I was like, this is going to sound kind of rude. I was not surrounded by high quality people in this union at all. And that was starting to become really important to me, is who I was going to be around. Because you know how they say that the people that you're around, you'll kind of base your personality off of them. And I have watched this in EMS. And, I noticed when I had like a high quality partner, I was in a good spot. If I had a low quality partner, it really brought me down and I had to fight to stay in a good frame of mind. But I did all the orientation, I did all the stuff. And the first job that they parked me in was doing steel framing, prefab framing, assembling wall panels at a giant plant, very loud, very noisy, 10-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week. I'm not sure how that was supposed to be really good. $15 an hour, running an impact driver all day long, just trying to screw little tiny screws, assembling these wall panels. and we'd hook them up to a lift and send them down the way. They get loaded up onto a truck and they go build something somewhere. It is not an exaggeration to say that that was the worst job I'd ever had. I was there for 2 weeks. Driving 45 minutes all the way across town into another county to get to the job. It was awful. And at the end of the first week, I'd had a little bit of carpal tunnel off and on prior to that. It was like full blown. I woke up one morning and my hand was like twice the size that it should be. I thought I had gotten like some kind of infection or something, but I realized that it was carpal tunnel. So I'm taking freaking, meloxicam for that and for the tendonitis in my feet and my heels from being in boots and everything on a concrete floor. And I'm like, this is not good. I am aging really fast in this job. And it's, it's obvious. I'm looking around like everybody working this job is, 10 or 20 years younger than me. A lot of them, they're just out of high school. I was like, okay, this is not going to work. Put in my notice for that, resign the union. And I see that the same bakery, needs to fill that dishwasher position again. So I called my friend at the time, the manager over there, and said, still need a dishwasher? She said, yes, I do. When can you start? And I'm like, literally tomorrow. I just quit this job. That was October of 2019. That's kind of important. October of 2019. She said, can you do a 1-year commitment? And I said, yeah, no problem. Don't worry about it. I need time to figure stuff out. So let's start back at the bakery. And I'm friends with people at the bakery. It's great. We're a good little team. Not a bad job at all. Have really nothing negative to say about that job. And so I work, we work through the, the Christmas rush, which is bonkers. The holiday rush is crazy when you're at a bakery, and it's good. And pretty much, almost always, it's a good spirited environment. Stress is pretty low. And, March of 2020 rolls around and shit gets weird, as it does for pretty much everybody in the entire world. And the bakery management kind of struggles initially with like, okay, do we stay open? Do we try to do takeout only? Like, their whole business is around people coming into the store and smelling everything and looking at everything in a display case. And it's a very, visceral experience that gets people to buy this stuff. We weren't set up for delivery. We weren't really set up for curbside, although they tried it for a little bit. And this was not the kind of business that had excessive reserve money to take a loss, to pay people to work and not be selling product. So they made the call to lay everybody off. And, I come home, and at this point we do have some money socked away. So I'm not panicking. Like, okay, I know we have enough money to pay our bills for a few months. And one thing I did forget to relay was at the same time. So for like a year and a half up to that point, since like 2018 or so, I had a few yard customers. I was mowing like 4 or 5, not very many, 4 or 5 yards on my off days, in my neighborhood. Just push mow yards, no big deal. It was one of those things, $25, $35 a yard. So that had been like a little stash as well. I forgot one of my other jobs. So early on at my return to the bakery, this is crazy. I did not realize how much of like a job history I had from the last several years until I went back and like counted it all through. Early on at my second round at the bakery, they only had work for me like 2 or 3 days a week because there was another guy who had that, who was also working in that position. So I was just looking around freaking work. I didn't really care I didn't really want it to be like fast food, but I was like, just money is money, you know? So I had a lead on another dishwasher position for a country club, of all things, country club. And that also lasted, I think, a whopper of 2 weeks. And sometime that 2 weeks may just have to be its own story, because that was the second worst job I'd ever been in. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name locations, but let's see here for a minute. We've got people, so private country club, right? Not open to the public. These people pay a whopping membership for this, you know, country club. So, you know, it's the golf course and the tennis courts and the pool and the restaurant and everything. So remember, excuse me, still got sniffles. Remember this, very important. I've been in EMS for 15 years. I have seen the grossest of the gross, the deadest of the dead, the nastiest that you could possibly be and still be alive. I have been in, you know, in the backs of restaurants many times for various medical calls, fall injuries, things like that, fast food. This kitchen was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. I could not believe it. I was like, do they not get inspected? Like, because they're a private membership thing, do they not get inspected by the whatever the food service people, the health department? Now, to be clear, coming from the bakery environment, we were fastidious about cleanliness. Like, that was the standard. And it was an incredibly high standard. And I had forgotten like how high that bar was as compared to other restaurants and things. But this was just like unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I'll leave it at that. It was gross. Also, it was very clear. I'm like, oh, I see that cocaine is still alive and well in the restaurant community. Yeah, it was wild. Like, let me be clear. Nobody was mean to me. Nobody was rude. Nobody harassed me. Nobody did anything to me bad. My observation is all I'm talking about. Just the state of the facility itself. Yeah. It wasn't that one. I'm not going to name it. Pip and I's heard stories. Yeah. And absolutely, one step closer says some kind of kitchen that would give Gordon Ramsay a stroke. I mean, I've never really watched those cooking shows. Like, that's not my idea of a good time. But from the little clips and things I've seen, I just, there was so much, because they had like multiple fryers and everything. It was big kitchen, really big kitchen, because they were used to, you know, accommodating hundreds of people at a time for parties and stuff. There was so much grease built up that if there was a stray spark, I don't know how the whole thing just wouldn't burn down. I mean, it was, I could just imagine like my manager from the bakery seeing that kitchen, like she would have to come apart. I mean, it was really something. So that was another 2 weeks, I think, that I spent there. It was horrible. And I sent a courtesy text and was like, peace out. And at that point I was like, I am done. I am done with JOB work. So that would have been like the wintertime. That would have been the wintertime of 2019. And then not too long after I left, pretty much it was a full-time position at the bakery. The other guy left. I got the full-time. They asked me if I wanted all the hours. I said, I'll take all the hours you can give me. And at that point I was like, okay, we can maintain on this. Now we're at March. Bakery closes. We all get laid off. And we're at that stage where like nobody really knows what's happening, right? Kind of weird. This is unprecedented. You know, we all sign up for unemployment. And, you know, initially it's whatever, like $223 a week that the state pays out. And then the state starts paying out, or actually at the federal level, we get all this relief money coming in. Hello, inflation later, but this money comes in. And I was like in a little bit of a spot where I could breathe easy. I was like, okay, we're not going to, and we kept making the house payments. We did not play the game of deferring payments. We did not do that. Everything stayed paid, every single thing. And I was like, well, got a little breathing room here. This is nice, but who knows how long it's going to last, right? Like, I don't trust free money. The whole thing was just too strange. I'm like, this is opportunity like waving in my face right now. So initially, just because my mindset was to keep earning and to keep developing the infrastructure at our little homestead there. I was like, food is always a good thing. Resilience is always a good thing. So I'm going to keep doing that. And I will start doing it as an example to others. Because at this stage, I did not have any social media presence for the homestead. I just didn't. I think I started like a page for it at one point, and I don't even know where it went. And I don't think I was very good about keeping up with it. Sometime over that winter, before the shutdowns, I had begun working with this concept of what if I put together tours of urban and suburban homesteads, because I was getting the sense like I was starting to find other people in my area that were into this. And I was like, even like small farms, places like that, that could benefit from agritourism. And I would be like the aggregator for it. I'm like, I can set up the tours, like I can handle it so that the farmers and the homesteaders didn't have to. And I kind of was, swirling this idea around in my head for a while. And I was at the bakery one day washing dishes, listening to podcasts, and that's when the name came to me, Strong Roots Resources. I'm like, that's a good name, It could be a lot of things. It could be a service business. It can be a product business. It can be a combo. It can be whatever I want it to be within this kind of thing of edible landscaping. So I knew I wanted that name, so I immediately grabbed the domain, and I went and I registered it with the county and the city at the time, as a sole proprietorship. And I was like, okay, cool, nailed that down. Still don't exactly know what this is going to be, but I've got the concept in place. Knoxville has this really cool place called the Knoxville Entrepreneurship Center that is part of the Chamber of Commerce. This is one of those things that if your municipality has something like this, a lot of these they're either partially taxpayer funded or they are funded via donations and things of that nature. Use it. So they had a project or a concept called oh my goodness, it's Jumpstart or something like that. But basically it was like a business incubator. And you could go to one of their counselors who was also a small business owner in the area, and you could get all your questions answered. So I came to her. Again, this would have been in the wintertime, so prior to the shutdowns, right? I said, I've got this concept, but I'm not real sure how I'm going to pull it off. So we kind of gamed it out for a little while, for about half hour. And she was like, it's cool. She was like, but at your stage, like this seems like something that could be a lot of organizing and a lot of liability, like potential liability of taking people onto other people's property. Was I going to do like a passenger van? Was I going to try to, coordinate everybody to show, most people can't have, 40 cars showing up to their property. She's like, so it's a cool idea, and I don't want to discourage it. She said, what else about this urban homesteading thing are you into? I'm like, well, I do. I love everything about it. Like, I'm just obsessed with it. She was like, can you teach it? And so I sat there. I was like, well, I guess. And it just never had occurred to me up to that point, aside from the fact that I've been telling my friends about this stuff and answering their questions for a few years at this point. I was like, yeah, I guess I can. She said, why don't you take it in that direction? Why don't you kind of start gaming out what that looks like to you and make a go of it? And she said, holler back at me and I'll help you with whatever you need. So jump back into the spring of 2020. I've got a few lawn mowing customers. I start adding more. This incredible thing happened, this little microcosm of my community, because I was pretty involved in my community. Like I went to the neighborhood board meetings, and I was on like speaking terms with most of my neighbors and people several streets over. And because I rode my bike so much, I was always riding around, always walking the dog around. So I felt like pretty connected to Lincoln Park, to Oakwood Lincoln Park. That was important to me. And so I was, and the neighborhood group was like always hopping. So as you guys well know, all of a sudden, a whole lot of people are now working from home. And bless the hearts of the USPS and Amazon and what that must have been like for delivering, and UPS and all those guys delivering all the shit we decided to buy when we were all going to be home. And one of the things that almost everybody was buying were raised beds and, rain barrels. And it's like everybody had the same idea at the same time. They're like, if I'm going to be home, this place better be productive. Like, it's amazing how much you pay attention to stuff like that when you're there all day long, and you're not just, leaving before the sun comes up and coming home after the sun's gone down, and your home is only a place that you sleep and eat. So, I'm just observing around my neighborhood all this stuff going on. The community gardens down the road kicked off real big, and I grabbed a plot over there to kind of be part of that too. It was a really, really exciting, energetic summer for me. I know for a lot of people that time was not good, and it was scary and it was tragic, and some people got sick, and just a lot of stuff, was very difficult. But for me, it was just really remarkable. So I find myself, I've picked up more yards to mow because, again, everybody's for one, a lot of people are getting kind of spindy because a lot of people are getting all this bonus money coming in that been laid off. For some people, a lot of people, more than they'd ever actually seen before. That was the case for me. Got more from unemployment. We're paying for it now with inflation. But at the time, I took that money and we stashed a lot of it. We fixed a lot of things on the house. We replaced the metal roof on our workshop / garage that had metal on it from looked like the freaking 60s, and made a lot of improvements to the land, and really invested it back in, and also, stashed it, which helped us later on. So, I'm out in the neighborhood every day. I've got 6 or 7 yards I'm mowing every day. I've got people that are like, well, what else do you do? Because when this is the thing about service work. It's not rocket science, guys. If you show up, if you communicate, if you do a good job, if you go a little bit above and beyond, and you have a good attitude, people want you back, and they ask you, what else can you do? And I was like, well, I'm like really into gardening. And so I found myself setting up gardens for people, setting up little turnkey systems, kind of teaching them how to do stuff. Planting fruit trees, doing little guilds and things like that. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I'm making money doing it. I'm just blown away. So that was an amazing spring and summer. But by about, as we were getting closer to the end of summer, that was by far the hardest I'd ever worked, by the way, like mowing all those yards with a push mower. And that was a little niche that I had, because most people in that neighborhood, most people had small yards and tiny, gates. So nobody could get a big zero turn in. So I was like, I got a push mower and a decent weed eater and a blower, and I was just wearing it out. I didn't have a trailer yet. I was throwing that stuff in the pickup truck. We had one truck, didn't have any other vehicle, threw that stuff in there, was getting after it. And it was just like, I had the bug. I had the self-employed bug in a big way. And I was just like, what else can I do? And so again, at the same time, I'm mowing all the time. I've got a good, like ear protection plus Bluetooth, listening to Spearco, listening to Nicole Sauce, listening to Harold Thornborough, so many good, like various Liberty podcasts, more, preparedness podcasts, homesteading stuff, just absolutely digging into everything that I can. And, but by the end of the summer, I was starting to feel a little squashed. A few things happened. We were, for one, like I pretty much had the property maxed out. I felt like I was doing as much as I could probably do, even with having a little more money to spend. I had pretty much all vertical space maxed out. The only thing I was still considering, we had our driveway was kind of weird. Like it went all the way to the back of the property. So this is a 1/5 acre lot, roughly 50 by 100 feet. We had an asphalt driveway that went all the way from the road, past the house, all the way to the detached garage / shed in the back. That was a big chunk of impermeable surface. I was doing, mostly I use it to keep firewood on, to keep firewood up off the ground. That's where I would process firewood, and I would stack it to dry until we put it in the shed. But I was like, man, this is a big chunk. This is a big chunk of my property that I'd like to use something else for. And I was starting to think about busting up that asphalt, a portion of it, not the whole thing, but just the part that was in the backyard. And I was like, I don't know if that makes sense, because then I got to try to get rid of it. And this is one like the city's not going to pick it up. So I was like, I feel like I'm kind of maxed out. And the neighborhood changed. That neighborhood shifted from, in my perception, a very much live and let live kind of environment to people wondering, like, why aren't you wearing your mask? Oh, you're not supposed to be, we didn't have like lockdowns to the extent that people in other states did. There was a lot of like policing going on, other neighbors being like, oh, well, they don't seem like they're playing along with the narrative, right? You guys kind of follow what I'm saying here. And so that happened, and crime started to ramp up. Our truck was broken into one night. I had all of my like go bags. I had a medical bag. I had hundreds of dollars worth of stuff stolen one night. And that was pretty much the last straw. I spent, because like I said, crime was up. It was starting to be increasingly common to hear drive-bys. Not like celebratory gunshots, but the kind when you pull up in front of a house, pull off a bunch and then speed off. That was happening. There were a couple of high-profile murders that were like crimes of opportunity, not drug related, not domestic related, but like there was a man whose car had broken down and he was found dead later, and they never did solve it. I don't think it's ever been solved. So the vibe had changed, and that sucked, because in a lot of ways I really liked that neighborhood. And I had a lot of great customers, a lot of great neighbors. But we were like, I think we're probably done here. The house was 120 years old, and I was getting tired of fixing stuff. And it just felt like it was very much even though we were only a few years away from having it paid off, I'm like, we're going to pay this thing off. I'm going to spend the next decade fixing everything. And it's going to be just like making a mortgage payment. So, we came out here, we talked to Tyler, we talked to mom and dad, and said, we'd like to move back to the farm. So Tyler and I scouted around, chose the site where we're at now, and got underway. So at that point, I was full-time running the business in the realm of, mowing, landscaping, a little bit of handyman work. And I was starting to get a few like actual like consulting with people outside of my neighborhood, starting to kind of figure out how to reach those people, how to market myself, how to advertise. Started going to workshops like Nicole's Spring Workshop, and did a business incubator there, and that pushed me further down the road. And so it's like I had the momentum, and I was like, I need more space. Like, this is where we're at. I want more space. I want to be back closer to my family. I want to not feel like I've got eyeballs on me all the time. And so so that took us to selling the house in October of 2020 and coming out here to the farm and getting the shop, staying in the shop / staying with mom and dad a little bit through the winter until our cabin was delivered in April, something like that. The thing about and I skipped over something kind of, I didn't mean to, but I'm going to circle back to this. Over the spring and summer of 2020, I go from a handful of, mowing jobs to, I think at my peak, 22 mowing customers and other jobs I'm adding in as I go, like just fitting stuff in. And in, I think it was August, we hear back from the bakery. They're ready to open back up again. And I talked to Nicole about this. I talked with other friends. I talked with my wife about this. And I was like, I can't do it. Then I can't leave. Like I literally had jobs scheduled in the future at that point. Like I had like installation work coming up at that point. I was like, there's no way. And the invitation back to the bakery was like, well, we might be able to give you a few hours here and a few hours there, but we're not really sure when they're going to be or how that's going to work. And I was like, I've got a mowing schedule at this point. I don't know how I can try to make these two things happen, especially with the bakery being on the other side of town. And so I wrote back. This is all done via email. I wrote back to my manager, and I said, I'm sorry, but I can't. And she said, well, you committed for a year, and your year is not up yet. And I was like, well, I did not anticipate the world ending and our entire society being upended for 6 months. And I was told that was disappointing on a personal level, and pretty much peace out. And that was the last time I spoke with that individual, who was a friend, and I have been friends, with her husband for a long time. And that, guys, right there, it was like one door slammed shut and another door was wide open. And I walked through it, and here I am, almost 5 years later, still successfully running this business. I have consulted with over 60 people, like 60 actual paying customers, 60, which is not bad considering that's the part of the business that I actually, quote unquote, advertise the least. Dozens and dozens of installation jobs, little bit of money in savings, all kinds of events I've been to, all kinds of awesome things that I have been a part of, that I continue to be a part of, all kinds of new opportunities coming my way. I don't think it would have happened if I had just returned to the 9 to 5. So, here's to walking through the open door. And I guess being willing to possibly, can a friendship. Maybe that wasn't much of one anyhow, if that's all it took to be done with it. But guys, it's really remarkable what happens. They was it fortune favors the bold. That's kind of what's funny about me, is like I can be very like a little bit of a worrywart and kind of want to like kind of pre-game the perfect situation. And then there's another side of me that if I just pay attention to my instincts and I just follow through and I don't question myself, it works. It works every time. So a lot of what I anticipate this year is going to be paying attention and following through on those instincts, because it hasn't let me down. And it's gone in the reverse too. So if I have gone on and done something that I knew in my gut was a bad idea, it was absolutely reinforced that was a bad idea. Whether it was, deciding to keep dealing with certain people, customers, things of that nature. Just, you guys know what's up. You have these moments yourself. So, at this point, like, I feel like my community, extended community, both the one that's here local to Knoxville, the folks that we see on the regular, the folks who come up here to our gatherings, those of you who are further away, but we catch up a few times a year at various events, or you guys pop into the live chat and check in with me. None of that would have been possible if I had gone back and whacked the easy button, like it was both the hardest, but the best thing I've ever done was to take that chance. So that brings me to, let's see, several days ago, I guess earlier in the week, I don't know what day it is. It's Friday. Earlier in the week, I met a different friend, a friend who I had not seen, who was kind of I was part of an activist group that dealt with mountaintop removal coal mining. This was one of the things I was doing while I was taking care of Nan. I was kind of trying to keep my mind on other things and not be completely immersed in just being a caregiver. And so she was a friend from that era. She was one of the people, part of that nonprofit. And it was one of the things where like nothing had happened or gone wrong between us, but we just weren't seeing each other because we were kind of running around in different circles, doing different things. That group had kind of, I don't know if it disbanded or if it kind of changed forms, but I was just not a part of it after a while. But she kind of reached out to me because she was looking for some Jerusalem artichokes and a few other, plants and seeds and things. I was like, heck yeah, I got them. Loaded up a bunch of stuff. She brought some stuff. We met up at a coffee shop, sat and talked for over an hour, traded things. I offered her some advice on some different stuff. And it was great to catch up. And, I was telling her what I've been up to for the last several years. And she was like, I remember that I had the group up to the farm at one time, several years ago when we weren't living out here. Had the group up to the farm as just like a little evening, like campfire, hangout kind of thing. And I was telling her that night, I'm like, I really want to find a way to make this work. I want to be back out here on the farm. This was over a decade ago. I want to be back out on the farm. I want to do these regenerative practices. I want to take care of the land. And I want to share it with other people. And at coffee, she was like, Carrie, you're doing it. You're doing the thing you said you were going to do. I didn't really have a roadmap for myself. And, there's still times where I'm like, crap, am I doing this right? Am I going about this the right way? But I'm here and I'm happening. It's happening. It's been happening. It will keep happening. There's more to do. There's more things to, kind of secure and tighten up and better, but like the momentum is there. So that was just a really, really fulfilling moment to be reminded by somebody who I had not seen in years. Tell me, like, Carrie, you're doing it. It happened. So yeah, that's the story, guys. That's pretty much the full story. I don't think I left out any super, I think I hit all the key points there as best as I can remember them. That is, especially for, pre 2018, there was, alcohol had a bit too much of a role in my life. So there are places where the memory is fuzzy. not so much after 2018. So, yeah, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for hanging out. I got to put these birds to bed, grab my flashlight, and take one more look at these little lambs. Make sure everybody's still good to go. So thank you for hanging out. We'll catch you guys next week. Y'all take it easy.